Hi, I'm Christine Tulley. I'm a senior writing coach with Defend and Publish, and welcome to episode 10, Dig In. We have recently developed this podcast series on Defend and Publish, and if you want to check out our previous episodes, they are all available at defendandpublish.com/podcasts. You can find several episodes and many of them are themed. But this month's theme for the month of March is really going to be focusing on the particular type of energy that we have in March as faculty or graduate student writers. And a lot of time, this energy is not quite there, for lack of a better word. So here's what I mean by that. At this time of year, a lot of folks decide that, we're really close to the end of the semester. So they tend to stop maybe writing or slacking off on writing projects, or they just slow down thinking, well, I really didn't get much done. I might as well just give up because I'm at the end of the semester. And it's easy to understand how faculty and students might feel that way. For example, on my campus, everywhere I go, there are announcements about not forgetting to, order your cap and gown. We are having a real face-to-face in-person graduation, socially distanced, but we are having something like that. So those announcements are everywhere. There's also announcements about student registrations for the fall, which makes it sound like spring's already over. And so I noticed that at this time of year, particularly with graduate students that I'm working with, but also some of the newer faculty, it tends to be a time where people just honestly, they're burned out at the end of, kind of the end of the academic year, because we are coming up on the end of that. And so what I'm going to advise is a couple of strategies here to think about digging into your writing instead of worrying about maybe slacking off or maybe not worrying about writing at all. And these strategies I think will be really useful just to work with the particular type of energy that March has to offer. So the first thing that I'm going to advise that you do is to look at your project list and maybe find a project that is one that can be accomplished in between 4 and 8 weeks. Because if we think about it, most of us have around 8 weeks left in a traditional academic semester. So if that's the case, if you can find something that you could knock out in that period of time, you could treat it like you're running a marathon or you're doing something that has a clear goal and maybe a short time frame. Sometimes those types of projects are best. So for example, I've been working with two different faculty. One faculty person is actually working on a book, but has this other article project in mind, and they have some data and a couple pieces of the article. And I had just asked him and I said, hey, is this something that you could do in 8 weeks? And he's like, yeah, I think I could probably do that. Because it wasn't so much time that he needed a full semester, and 8 weeks was actually just about the right amount of time for something like that. So even though he's working on a book and that's really his priority project, just to take advantage of this sort of strange energy in March, he decided to focus on the article and just go like, all out trying to get this article done. And so last time I checked with him, it seems that that strategy has been going really well. Another person I know is preparing for a conference presentation in June. This would be the type of project that you could think, oh, well, I don't really need to even start thinking about this maybe until May because it's not until June. But this particular faculty member, this is a conference that's very important to her. It's in a subfield that she hasn't ever presented at this conference before. And so that's the project that she chose to just worry about that. She's not worrying about any of her other projects at the moment. So if you're somebody that tends to get overwhelmed with juggling a lot of different multiple writing projects, even though that's something that we've talked about through our webinars at Defend and Publish and in some of our other content, for some people, they're just at this time of year, one project is all they can handle, and that's okay. You can find a project that just fits within this shorter time frame. So if you've got one of those projects that maybe you need to finish up, maybe it's a project that's been on the back burner and you're 80% there, or it's a revise and resubmit for an article that you haven't done anything with, that can be a great project for this time. Another thing that you can do if you are working on something large, like a dissertation or a book or a textbook or something like that, another really good strategy is to not worry so much about generating new content right now, and instead actually go through and do some cleaning up of the writing. Normally, I'm all for saying, hey, let's worry about those kinds of things at the end. But right now in March, this is the kind of energy that people might not have for having the big thoughts, the big try to move the giant pieces in a project. And instead, this is time well spent actually looking at what you have written and going through and actually tweaking some of the sentences and doing some of those smaller editing things. Here, I'm not talking about just fixing punctuation, but I'm actually talking about clarifying your thinking and your writing. So one thing that I like to do, and I've mentioned this in other podcasts, is to pull out sentences in isolation or even a paragraph and look at it in isolation. So when I say that, I mean, open it in Microsoft Word or Google Doc or wherever you have it, highlight that sentence, copy and paste it, and drop it in a brand new document so you can just look at it by itself. I've fixed a lot of sentences that way where I'll read the sentence by itself and I'll say, I don't really have the actual topic that I need to have in this sentence, or I'm not being very specific with my wording. I really need to explain the difference between discusses and argues or something like that. So this is a time that if you haven't really spent too much time with a thesaurus, it's great to spend some fun time looking for that. That's a good way to freshen up your language in general, is to use a thesaurus if you can. So you might find some different ways to say some of your key terms or some of your descriptive language. Another thing that you might do is go to the academic phrase bank. I know that that's something that I've showed in episode 4 in trying technology tools. The academic phrase bank is out of University of Manchester, and this is one that is wonderful for tweaking your writing and thinking about how you're going to do specific academic writing moves. So that might include things like doing a comparison and a contrast, or concluding or summarizing why one methodology is chosen over another methodology. So academic phrase bank is another great tool to tweak your language a little bit. And that might be what you can handle right now in your writing sessions. So even if you're only doing, say, half an hour a day and you're only working on doing some of the more stylistic things or clarifying your wording, that's not time lost. That kind of work really needs to be done. And a lot of times, we recommend saving that towards the end so you get the bigger pieces like honing your argument completed first. However, thinking about language, sometimes by working with your language in that way, by using some of these stylistic tweaks or a thesaurus, it might actually help you clarify your argument because you're still trying to focus on what you want to say. So that's another thing that you could do that makes it a little bit more fun to do your writing, if you know that that's the type of work you have to do and you don't have to make some very large decisions at this point. Another thing that I like to do, and I've think of this a little bit differently than Joli Jensen talks about this in her book called Write No Matter What. She talks about actually pretending you're going to present at a conference and developing a conference presentation using your article or your book or something like that. And it's a great strategy because if you think you're going to present it to an audience, it automatically jumpstarts your brain into thinking a different way that you might be able to reach that audience. What I like to do is move this to a step further and actually draft out some slides. And for dissertation students, this is great because a lot of times these slides where you're starting to draft out how you might present your research, they can be used for a conference presentation. They might be used in your dissertation defense with some tweaking, obviously. And then for faculty writers that are working on an article, sometimes using PowerPoint as a way to pre-write is a great way to think about doing some of the moving work of the parts of your essay. It's a way to kind of do a little bit of brainstorming in a way that we understand as listeners from going to conferences. So I know my colleague, Chris Denecker, has written something on this. I'll make sure I link to that in the show notes. But I really like the strategy because if you go to a writing session and you actually make a couple of slides about what you want to argue instead of writing, that does take a little bit of the pressure off because the space is naturally limiting, whereas the words on a page could go on and on. So I encourage you to try that strategy. And then, of course, save those slides because you might use them later in a conference presentation or another mechanism. So hopefully those strategies are ones that help you a little bit on digging in. One final one that might work is actually to commit or recommit yourself to doing writing a little bit more frequently so you don't lose your momentum. One of the things that also happens to get in the way at this particular time of year is that we have all those weird once a semester or once a year type of events. They might be things like end of the year banquet or maybe a midterm study group that you normally don't run, but you have to run in a particular week. And these events start stacking up and creating some blockades in our schedules that might get in the way of our writing time. So one thing that you might think about too is actually committing to writing every day for 30 minutes. That's not a strategy that I do. I know it does work for some writers. I'm more of writing on just the weekdays. But 30 minutes a day in these frequent short periods of contact, again, once you have that 30 minutes and you're finished, you can say, well, I'm finished for today. Obviously, if you have a deadline or you're a graduate student writing a dissertation, your dissertation is your job. So you're obviously going to be putting in more time than 30 minutes a day, hopefully. But in general, if you have another writing project happening, that might be okay just to maintain your momentum for a little while and get back in the rhythm. If you can find yourself writing past 30 minutes, see how far you can go. Again, it could be something like extra steps on your Fitbit or extra, miles at the gym. How many did you manage to get? See if you can push yourself past 30 to like 38 minutes one day or 46 or something like that. And as a bonus, keep track of it if you can, even if it's just a post-it in the corner of your computer where you say 38, cross it out, and you see a 46 the next day. That's very motivating, and it will encourage you to try to beat that 46 probably. So hopefully you found these strategies helpful, and the Write No Matter What book, the Joli Jensen book I reference, I'll make sure that's in the show notes, along with my colleague Chris Denecker's article about using the slides for pre-writing, so you can see some of the things about that. But in general, I encourage you to pay attention to your energy in March and see what you can do to dig in and stay with your writing so you're focused and you're getting some things accomplished. So happy writing this week.